Hello, and welcome to the Army Research Office Guide to Proposal Writing webinar, hosted by the Army HBCU-MI Student Program for Army Research and Knowledge, or SPARK. Today's webinar focuses on a critical skill for any successful research partnership with the Army, developing strong, competitive proposals. This session, titled A Guide to Proposal Writing, is presented by the DevCom Army Research Laboratory and the Army Research Office, and is designed to help you craft proposals that meet Army expectations and stand out during review. We are pleased to welcome today's featured speaker, Dr. Dawanne Poree, Science Integration Officer at the Army Research Office. Dr. Poree will share expert guidance on structuring compelling proposals, communicating complex technical ideas clearly, and managing cost effectively. Her insights are drawn from years of experience supporting Army-funded research and working closely with faculty and research institutions nationwide. Whether you're a faculty researcher, a sponsored programs office representative, or a student preparing for future Army collaborations, this webinar will offer valuable strategies and practical tools. Dr. Poree will also touch on how researchers can collaborate more effectively with their sponsored programs offices to ensure proposals meet administrative and technical standards. By the end of today's session, you'll have a clearer understanding of how to approach Army proposal writing with purpose, precision, and professionalism. My name is Crystal Nolan. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that you can ask questions in the Q&A feature of Zoom at any time, and Dr. Poree will address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. If you have questions about using the Zoom platform for this event, please feel free to enter them in the chat window now. Technical support is on hand to help you with any issues you may be having. Finally, within the next few weeks, we will send a link to the webinar recording to everyone who registered. This will allow you to revisit key parts of the presentation and Q&A, or share with colleagues who may find the webinar valuable. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Poree.
Well, thank you, Ms. Nolan. That was an awesome introduction. Give me 1 second. I'll get my slides pulled up here. I hope you guys can hear me okay, and if not, please let me know.
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
All right, I'm sharing my slides. Let me know if they're coming through okay, and I'll make sure I hide this down at the bottom. So, are you all able to see my slides?
It looks good. Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. So again, thanks for that introduction. Just to reiterate, my name is Dawanne Poree, and for the last about 2.5 years, I've been a science integration officer here at the Army Research Office. But prior to that role, I actually served 9 years as the polymer chemistry program manager. So I have seen my fair share of proposals over the years, and I'm very excited to talk to you all today about the best approach to the proposal writing process, and more importantly, how to engage with program managers, which is the first and most important step. Now, before we get into the proposal writing process, it's important that you have a clear-eyed understanding of the DoD funding landscape, as there are a lot of misconceptions about the types of research that DoD funds, the level and scale of resources available for funding. And so I'd like to kind of give us some ground us in some basic truths to begin with, and kind of dispel some of these common myths, as I think this will help offer good context for how to engage in the proposal writing process. And this first myth is DoD is only interested in applied research. And I can't tell you how many times over the course of my time as a program manager that I would get folks coming up to me at meetings or folks sending in white papers that kind of focused on what's the next widget or material or device, because there's an assumption that it's DoD, they need all of these big things. And so that clearly must be what the program managers are interested in. And that's actually not the case. And so while there are a lot of places within Army and DoD that specifically focuses on the applied nature of research, as they should, that is not the sole purpose of our funding portfolio. And so I will, on this slide, kind of give you a snapshot of Army's S&T enterprise as it exists today. As folks may have heard, we are undergoing a bit of a restructuring, but I think everything under the AFC umbrella will remain. So right now, our head command is the Army's Futures Command, and it's responsible for all activities related to force modernization, and thus all of our research and development falls under the umbrella of Army Futures Command. Now, the component of Army's Future Command that's responsible for R&D is DevCom. It's the Combat Capabilities and Development Command. And it comprises just about all of our research activities. And what you'll see is that there is a great deal of applied research. So Army must care about armaments. It must care about chemical and biological research. It must care about aviation and missile, ground vehicles. Our soldier center focuses on everything that's relevant to the individual soldier. So think uniforms, MREs, parachuting, etc. However, there is a component of DevCom that's specifically focused on foundational basic research, and that is the Army Research Laboratory. Now, the Army Research Laboratory has two primary components. It has our intramural or our in-house researchers. So there are government laboratory scientists that carries out research across 11 different competencies currently. However, Army has recognized that our in-house research program can only do so much, and that there is a vast amount of intellectual capital that resides in our national and international research community. And so we have dedicated a second component, which is the Army Research Office, that is really focused on engaging and serving as the primary conduit to the extramural research ecosystem. So ARO's primary role is to engage the extramural research community. The goal is to create and drive scientific discoveries. And I want you to highlight those words because that's very important. It's focused on scientific discoveries, not a new widget, not a new device. And we need these scientific discoveries to give us leap ahead future Army capabilities. While not our primary focus, we do have certain tools available to us, particularly through like our small business programs that help us to drive science related to existing Army needs, but a lot of that work does stem out of our more basic research portfolio. Again, the ultimate goals for us are also to accelerate the transition of basic research. We're also focused on educating and training that future Army workforce by showing folks what type of research Army is specifically interested in. So by students working with us as graduate students or even postdocs, and they're learning about the Army science ecosystem. And so this education and training of our future Army scientists and engineers is a big one for us. And at the end of the day, what we're really after is being able to prevent technological surprise by our adversaries in the future. And so this is the primary role of ARO, but I want to highlight that our bread and butter here is basic research. So I mentioned before that ARL is organized by competencies, and I have those on this slide. I'm not sure if you can look inside the wheel here, and I'll make sure you guys have access to these slides, but under the umbrella of each of these competencies is fundamental science. So microbiology, genetics, biochemistry, polymer chemistry, materials design. So that's a lot of basic research, a lot of fundamental scientific programs that really undergird these competencies, and they provide the foundational expertise and the full breadth of informed scientific discovery that we need as an Army to help shape our future operational concepts. So I guess the best way to sum all of this up is that ARO is focused on finding the world's best science. So I want you to take away from this that while there is a role for there's a lot of applied research going on across the Army. There is a world where we actually do care about foundational, fundamental, basic research, and we're looking for the world's best research. We're not focused on particular applications, but we're really looking across the scientific landscape to help shape that far future Army for 20, 30, and even 40 years from now. And so just this first myth I want to make sure that we are clear on is that I hope I've been able to show you that we have a very strong appetite within Army for basic research. We actually prioritize research that is high risk and high reward. And if you're engaging with other folks at other our sister agencies like Navy or Air Force, they also have similar counterparts that are also interested in the same things in terms of basic research. But speaking for ARO in particular, we prioritize basic research again that's high risk, that's high reward. We want disruptive science that can enable leap ahead capabilities. And so I just really wanted to provide this context that Army does care about fundamental basic research. When you're approaching a program manager who's at ARO, one of the easiest ways to be I don't want to say shut down, but we will balk a little bit if you're coming with this an idea that's focused on a specific DoD application. If you already have in mind a specific avenue where your research can go, you're probably already too far down the pipeline. We're really after higher risk basic research that can have broad Army relevance. We're not quite sure where it'll fit in across the ecosystem just yet. So just keep that in mind. So the next myth I'd like to just harp on a bit for a second is that DoD has this large budget and therefore we must have vast resources available for funding research. And while the first part of this is true, and I'll get into just some of the dollars because I think it's important to kind of contextualize some of this up front. There's vast amount of resources for research funding actually is not true, and I want to make sure folks understand that. So if we look at FY24, DoD's base budget was $825 billion. That is a large sum of money. However, the amount that was allocated to research, development, testing, and evaluation was maybe about less than 20% of that. So we're talking $152 billion, which is also still a good bit of money, but a vast majority of that is for testing and evaluation. If we bring this down even further to basic research, which is where ARO sits in this ecosystem, we're talking DoD spent only $2.6 billion out of its $825 billion pot on basic research. If you break that down by the services, we saw Air Force got 567 million, Army 561, and Navy a little bit more, 664. However, as I mentioned before, all of our basic, and I'll make this point clear, all of the basic research funding does not flow to ARO. Those centers that we have, all of them have some component of 6-1 dollars. Our in-house research lab also does 6-1 basic research as well. And so this $561 million doesn't all come to ARO for funding extramural research. In any given year, ARO's budget is about $75 to $100 million for us to spend on extramural basic research. And we have about 40 programs here. So that means every program gets on the order of about $1.875 to $2.5 million per year, which in the grand scheme of things on an annual basis is not a lot. So our funding here is very limited. So our programs have to be extremely focused. They're extremely focused. They're extremely specialized. And that's why it's important for you to engage with the program managers to know what it is that they're specifically looking for when you are beginning the proposal writing process. And so I just wanted to highlight here that while DoD has a very large budget, less than 1% of that budget is actually allocated to basic research, even less of that to ARO to fund on extramural basic research. So our basic research programs are highly focused in very specific areas within their respective disciplines. So in order to learn what those specific focus areas are, you must read our BAA, and I'll walk you through exactly how to do that in a moment here. And most importantly, you must engage the program manager. And I'll tell you why before I go into the broad agency announcement, I really want to kind of just foot stomp a bit on why this engagement with the program manager is critical. So our program managers are scientists and engineers in their own right. They are the Army's subject matters experts, and they serve as the nexus between the extramural research community and our Army S&T community. So our program managers actually are actively engaged with the Army S&T community as well as concept developers. So they have a very deep understanding of what current and future Army needs are, and they use that knowledge to create and direct new science that may lead to breakthroughs necessary for these game-changing future technologies. Because program managers have full authority to develop, shape, and fund their portfolios, engaging with them before the proposal submission process is critical. Okay, I feel like I'm keep saying that over and over, and I really want to harp on that point. In all the years that I have been at ARO, and it'll be about 14 years, I believe, in November, I've never seen a proposal submitted cold with no engagement with the program manager that has been successful. That is why that component of it is extremely critical. So now I'm going to walk you through how to navigate the BAA. So for some folks, they may already know who the program manager is in whatever area that they are relevant to them. And if so, that's great. If you have an email address, you can kind of skip over the BAA part if you'd like. However, if you do not, I'd like to walk you through how to navigate the BAA. For a long time, our BAA was actually just a PDF document. However, in the last couple of years, we've taken painstaking efforts to make navigating the BAA a more seamless and user-friendly process. And so it's now much more interactive and searchable, and I'll walk you through how to do that. So step one, if you go to URL, this URL down at the bottom of the screen, arl.devcom.army.mil, at the top of that page, you will see collaborate with us. Select collaborate with us, and where it will take you is to this page where you'll see avenues for research collaboration, and directly under that you'll see ARL broad agency announcement. And I'll make sure you guys again have access to these slides, and a direct URL for this collaborate with us page is here to the right. Once here, you would click on learn more. And then once you're here, you have two options. If you're someone who likes to have the PDF version of the BAA and you'd rather download that and peruse it in that fashion, you can just click download all BAA topics as a PDF. If not, you can then click on the browse current BAA topics, excuse me, and that will take you to our searchable web page. And I actually recommend this. I like using this myself because I was not a big fan of the PDF. So once you're here, you can actually filter to help you find areas that are most appropriate. And so I mentioned before, so our in-house research program does have interest in interacting with the extramural basic research community. So you can actually search by office. I think it says Office of Responsibility. It might be, I don't think it's shown on my slide here, but it'll say ARL Office of Responsibility. And you can click either ARD, which is our in-house program, or ARO. If you click ARO, you can also choose the discipline that is most relevant to you. You can choose multiple disciplines if you like. Another way to search this page, and it's not shown on here, but on this page of the website, above this gray box, there is a search engine that allows you to search by keywords, or if you know a program manager's name, you can type their name in there as well, and it'll give you back anything that's relevant to whatever you put inside the search engine. But if you choose the filters, it will then take you to your filtered list in alphabetical order. And then once you click on the title of the topic that you're most interested in, what it then pulls up is a full description of that BAA topic. So that'll tell you exactly. So the program manager's name and contact information is off to the right side of the screen, and it'll give you a full description of exactly what they're looking for and focusing on within their portfolio. A number of folks tend to have maybe what they call thrust areas, like in this one, it's called online learning theory, methodology, and techniques. Also interested in decision making for the open world, and then interaction. It'll tell you what those different thrust areas are. So this kind of gives you a bird's eye view into the types of things that the program manager may be listed in. Now, once you figured out what topic is the one that's you're most interested in, down here at the bottom, it gives you strongly encouraged submission information. And the first step there, again, I feel like I'm going to be stumping on this again, is to conduct a preliminary inquiry with the ARL point of contact. So contact the program manager. And the reason for this, and as I mentioned before, their information is off on the right. And the reason for this is there are several reasons for this. One, as I mentioned before, our program managers have an annual budget of anywhere from 1.8 to $2.5 million a year. However, most of our awards are 3-year awards, which means we're only turning over about a third of the program annually, which means that for a $2 million award, you may only have about $660,000 available for new funding, which in the grand scheme of things is not a lot of money. So program managers again have to be very selective about what it is that they're funding in any given year. They may need to balance. So we typically like to keep our portfolios balanced. We don't want to be overfunded in one thrust area and not another, because again, we've chosen these thrust areas very strategically based upon what we know Army needs need to be. And so we try to keep those balanced. So that may mean if I have a couple proposals that have cycled out under one of these thrust areas, then I may want to beef that one up the next time. And so there may be particular areas that I'm emphasizing or de-emphasizing within the course of a fiscal year. Program managers, again, as I mentioned earlier, we tend to engage often with the Army scientific community, Army conceptors, and maybe we've become privy to some more information that makes us want to emphasize or de-emphasize another area based on current based on Army priorities. And so it's very important to engage the program manager to know which one of these areas may or may not be of most relevance at that time. And we'll get into now what's the best way to go about doing that. And so when engaging with the program manager, what we have found to be the best approach is sending an email that has some folks call it the menu of ideas. I tend to refer to them as idea paragraphs. And these should be ideas that align with the program as outlined in the BAA. So we would assume that you've read through the BAA, you have seen the types of things the areas that we are interested in. And so we're looking for what ideas you may have that's relevant to what we have shown in the BAA. Remember, we are not risk averse. We really like ideas that are far out, high risk, and possibly even a bit crazy, although they should be scientifically sound, right? And so you can submit these at any time. I typically suggest that folks send roughly around 3 ideas, but I would say anything upwards of 2 is good. I wouldn't say go to 5 or 6, because then that may again be too much. I would say maybe start with your best 3 to 4, kind of get a gauge of what the program manager may or may not be interested in, and then revamp at that point. One of the things to not do at this stage is to ask the program manager, what research do you want me to do? The BAA has kind of already given you detailed information on what our interests are. We want to know what's the new exciting research that you're already doing, the areas that you already have expertise in that could be relevant to what we forecasted through our BAA as being our areas of interest. These idea paragraphs really serve as like the launch pad for conversations with the PM about ideas that are most relevant to their programs. And then the next steps would then be the development of a white paper based on one of the ideas that the program manager has expressed interest in. So typically for me, if I get several idea paragraphs, I may go through and say, I'm not really interested in numbers 1 or 3, and this is why my program is more going away from this, but I really am keen on idea paragraph number 2. Can you give me more details about that? And those more details come in the form of a white paper. Trying to get my cursor here. Come in the form of a white paper, and a white paper is really a meatier document that's typically about 4 to 5 pages that kind of better fleshes out the idea that the program manager has expressed interest in. So if you're invited to submit a white paper, this is what the program manager really wants to know. First and foremost, is it basic research? If the focus is on a specific application or a device or component development, that is outside of the scope of our mission. And so we want to know upfront, Is this basic research? What is the scientific question that you're seeking to address? What's the fundamental knowledge to be gained here? Also provide some context behind this idea. What's been done in this area before, and why hasn't it been successful? What is achievable now, that and why are you the right person to do it? What's achievable now? Why wasn't it achievable 5 years ago? Um, and if it's successful, so what? What does it mean? How will it impact the scientific community? What future technologies could this enable? And then, most importantly, for Army, because it's Army making an investment, why should Army or DoD care about what it is that you're doing? Um, and then finally, what we'd like to know, at least at the white paper stage, is what resources will this require? So, how much money are you requesting? How many years do you think this will take? Most of our awards are roughly about 3 years, but they don't have to be. We have some folks that say, I want to try this for a year. I may want to, this may be an effort that I think may take 4 years. There's always some flexibility in those types of things. And so your white paper is kind of where you lay out all of the resources in terms of time, money, and personnel that you would need to pursue this research. And one of the reasons why we really ask this resource question is because we have a variety of different award types that are available to us based on the answers that you may give. Um, so, for example, our most common award type is our single investigator awards. These are, we call them single investigator, but we can fund multiple PIs. So I've had, when I was a program manager, funded a couple of awards that would have two researchers working on those. That's completely fine. We just call it single investigator. And that's normally because the dollar amount of these is typically enough to cover a PI, a graduate student, or a postdoc. So they're roughly about $150,000 a year. Again, this is flexible. So I always tell folks, request the amount that you need, that you think you'd realistically need. We can always scale back if if our budgets don't allow for that. And these are typically about 3-year awards. In addition to that, we have other funding for early career PI. So if you're a younger professor who's within the first 5 years of award, there's actually the early career awards. It comes out of the same pot of funds as a single investigator, but there are some folks who really like the named recognition of having a young investigator, is what we used to call it. Now we call it an early career award. Those max out at $120,000 a year, and they're also 3-year awards. For folks who are at HBCU-MIs, in addition to the OSD rep dollars, we have our own dollars for individuals at those universities. Those are typically about $140,000 a year for 3 years. But again, I don't think there is a cap on this amount. So again, ask for what you realistically need. And then I think ARO is probably one of the only agencies that offers this short-term innovative research award. And this actually was one of my favorites as a program manager, because it allows you to provide seed funding in the amount of $60,000 for 9 months to go after some really high-risk ideas that you may not have preliminary data for. And so I often use these STIR when I wasn't quite sure, like I really like this idea, but it's not really, they haven't really been able to substantiate that at work, but conceptually it's a fantastic idea. How about we use fund it for 9 months, $60,000, and it excuse me, and that actually led to folks getting the preliminary data that they needed to substantiate and support a single investigator. So this is one that the other services, I believe, do not have a complementary funding vehicle for. So that's another one that kind of sets ARO apart in that vein. And so just want to highlight again here that your white paper really helps the PM conceptualize how what you're proposing fits into their program, both scientifically and financially. When preparing the white paper, again, it should be we wanted you to focus on a well-written scientific question that proposes a very novel approach to addressing that question. It should describe the level of effort associated, again, to include all of those necessary resources, and they should not be any longer than 5 pages, and those can be submitted to the PM at any time by email. Now, I know folks say, I thought this was supposed to be a focus on proposal writing. What I really wanted to show you was the amount of work and effort that is needed long before you even get to the proposal writing stage. Before you even think about submitting a proposal, there is so much that goes into getting to that point. And so I really wanted to kind of give you a clear-eyed view of the process. These preliminary steps of the idea menu, followed by the detailed white paper, really helps us as program managers home in on only the ideas that we want to get full proposals on. That actually relieves a lot of burden from the university administrative offices, as well as even our administrative offices, because we're not getting in proposals they're not working on proposals that won't have a chance at being successful. We aren't intaking proposals that won't have a chance at being successful. And a lot of this upfront work is really just a dialogue between the university researchers, and the ARO PMs. And so it really prevents all of us from going this painstaking effort of preparing and submitting proposals that the program manager just isn't interested to. So by the time you get to the actual proposal writing phase, you have already cleared several important hurdles at this point. And so if you're at the proposal writing stage, you're really just expanding on the white paper. With that said, the proposal does need to be it should be a self-contained description. At this point, everything has been between the researcher and the program manager. Once we go to proposal writing stage, we then open it up to reviewers. One of the things that we do at ARO is that's unique is that we don't convene one panel that reviews all proposals. We program managers read through every proposal, and we hand select reviewers who have the expertise that matches what you proposed. However, those reviewers are not going to have time to go through a whole deep dive of the literature to better understand what it is that you're trying to do. So your proposal needs to be self-contained. Remember, the program manager up to this point will be the only one who has seen your white paper. Our reviewers have not, and so make sure that your proposals are well detailed. Now, in addition to expanding on what was discussed in a white paper, such as, is it basic research? Why now? Who cares? So what? And the resources, in your full proposal, not only are you expanding on those things, but we want you to kind of really put even more meat on the bone. So is this a hard problem that you're trying to go after? If so, why? Why hasn't the question been answered yet? If it is a new question that we haven't been able to ask before, what makes it possible to ask that question now? What makes it challenge? What may make answering this new question challenging? And we also want to know the risk. How confident are you in this question? If you aren't, what does success look like? And if you find a different answer, will we have learned something that's of value? And so the proposal writings part kind of really again expands on the white paper and really puts even more meat on the bones here. Now for the proposals, everything else you've done up to this point has been communication with the PM by email. Proposals are different. They must be submitted via grants.gov. And it's important to consult the BAA for full details, because all of those funding streams that I mentioned before have different requirements. Like, I think the STIR proposal can only be a maximum of 20 pages, and those 20 pages includes all of the required forms, the required grants.gov forms that go along with it. And so it's very important that you consult the BAA to get more of those types of details. It actually may be easier to get that kind of information from the actual PDF version of the of the BAA. I think the website is really good for searching of topics, but the PDF version may be good for getting after more of those requirements. The proposal, our BAA has a 5-year window, so I think it's currently open through 2027. That doesn't mean that just because you can submit a proposal at all times. Again, it's best to engage with the program manager to figure out what their optimal time for submission is, because we don't get funds. We don't have access to dollars all year long. So when I was a PM, I typically like to have proposals in by September so that I could spend September, early part of October, getting them reviewed, so that I could be ready to fund when we would typically get our first drop of funds in the November, December time frame. Those timelines can always just be different based upon the year, and every program manager will be different in terms of what their submission process is. And so, again, I will harp on how important it is to engage with the program manager, excuse me, to kind of not only lay out, have the lay of the land of the research, but also how and when to best submit your proposal. I think we'll end up with a lot of time for questions. I went much faster than I thought, and so I'm just going to wrap it up here. Um, Again, I hope I was able to provide you with good context around the DoD funding landscape. I know there is a strong interest. I want you guys, I hope you took away that there's a strong interest in fundamental basic research, strong interest in high risk, high reward research. However, we don't have endless resources. And so our programs are highly focused, they're highly specialized. And so engaging with the program managers is extremely critical, to kind of gauge what their specific focus areas are at any given point in time. And with that, I will stop and take any questions that folks have.
All
And
right.
if anyone has any specific questions about anything at this point, I'm happy to take.
Well, Dr. Poree, I want to jump in really quick and say thank you so very much for your detailed and pertinent presentation. And as you said, now we're going to open up the floor for some questions that have been already submitted
Great.
inside the Q&A pod. And
Okay.
so the first question, Dr. Poree, is from, and I apologize to this person if I'm mispronouncing their name, but Fasiha. And the question is, do Army grants require citizenship, or are permanent residents eligible for them?
So permanent Army grants do not require citizenship. We do have a research protection process that we do follow when any grant is submitted. Doesn't matter if you are a U.S. citizen or not. Any grants that are submitted, we do undergo a research and protection process. But I mean, we can fund research from universities outside of the United States. So citizenship is not a requirement for funding. No.
Thank you for that. The next question is from Michael. And the question is, he teaches computer science at a 4-year HBCU. He wants to know if you can talk about what kind of opportunities would be available for his institution, for his educational institution.
So this is a primarily, if I'm understanding, a primarily undergraduate institution, and he'd like to know what type of funding we provide for those. Our funding streams don't differ based on the based on the type of university. If you have an undergraduate, if you have an undergraduate program and you'd like to propose and you're doing undergraduate research, there's nothing precluding you for requesting funding from any of from any of those different streams of funding that I showed earlier. There
Thank
is no difference. Now, again, you do have to recognize that when you are competing for dollars, you are competing against universities who do have graduate students and postdocs, but that's when it becomes important for you to distinguish the importance of what it is that you do and why what you're doing is important to the overall Army landscape.
Thank you so much for that, Doctor. The next question is from Sajid. And the question is, can we speak with Army scientists at a specific command and then circle back to the program officer?
If you know someone there, there's nothing that precludes that. As I showed, I believe, let me see if I can go back. Well, we're not on my slides anymore, I don't think. And I'll send you guys out. I'll send out a copy of my slides. But if you go back to the Navigate BAA and all the steps that I took you through, one of those was the page where you could filter, and it'll show you can filter by the topics that are specific to our in-house research program. So if you'd like to peruse that, and if there's a program, if there is a topic in there that interests you, you're always able to reach out to the POC that's listed on there if you would like to get more information, but there's nothing precluding that at all. Just remember that what they may be interested in at the time, because what they may be interested in and what our programs are focused on at the time could be different. Oftentimes they will be, just because we have different lenses that we're kind of viewing things through sometimes. But there's nothing precluding you from reaching out to Army scientists, whether it's at one of the centers, if you're aware of what they're doing, or even within ARO.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Our next question is from someone who didn't leave their name. That's fine. The question is this, no, I'm sorry. Could you share how the current government environment is influencing Army Research Office programs and what impact, if any, this may have on the likelihood of proposals being funded?
So what I will say is, as of now, we're not seeing any significant impacts in terms of fund this, but don't fund that. Um, the question may become, going forward, what our budgets may or may not look like. Are we going to see increases in budgets, decreases in budgets? And of course, if any of those things happen, then it kind of influences how much more we can support, or what we need to scale back on, and then internally we'll make those types of decisions. But as of now, we're not seeing. Um, there is no directive that, oh, you must get out of this particular program because the administration doesn't care about that anymore. We're not at that. We're not there.
Wonderful. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
There's another anonymous question that has come in, and the question is this structure replicated between the branches so we can explore BAAs from each branch and the respective program managers?
So there is a bit of similarity. So the same way there's an ARL for Army, there's an NRL, so a Navy Research Laboratory for the Navy, and there is AFRL, the Air Force Research Laboratory for Air Force. And each one of them has their component extramural agency. So our Navy counterpart is the Office of Naval Research. Our Air Force counterpart is the Air Force Office of Scientific Research. All of the program managers across, so all of our program managers here know who their counterparts are at those other agencies. We go through a great deal of effort to make sure that we are not stepping on each other's toes, and we try to make sure that if there are portfolios, or when I was a program manager for polymer chemistry, I knew who the polymer person was at Navy, I knew who the polymer person was at Air Force, and we make sure that if one person is making a $2 million investment in one area, then there's no point in my program duplicating that. And so we try to make sure that there were clear lane lines between all of them, but there is um, a complementary structure between them,
Oh,
between all services.
thank you for that clarification. The next question is, do POs prefer email or telephone for initial contact?
Email,
Email, got it.
email,
Okay.
email always works best. Travel for us has started to pick back up a little bit. And so if you call on the phone, then I may or may not be available to answer, but we typically are always able to have access to our emails. I will say, to be persistent sometimes, just because it may be depend on the time of the year and what all the program managers have going on at that time, that maybe your first email they don't immediately respond to. I would say give it maybe a week or two, reply back. A persistence definitely pays off. Now you have to tread this line of not being so persistent that it becomes annoying. But I think having this fine line, but making sure you're following up is always going to be advised. But I would always say email,
Okay. Thank you
email
for
first.
that.
And then once you email them and make that initial engagement, you can always say, is it better for me to call you, or would you prefer email? And then they can give you more guidance there. But typically email is the best first line of communication.
Okay, wonderful. All right, the next question is the full amount of a given ARO award now required to be paid in full upfront, or is the ARO continuing to operate as it and other agencies have previously, in which only the annual allotment is needed for the budget?
Okay, so if I'm understanding, you're asking, are we essentially forward funding all of it up front, or will we continue with what we've been doing, which is giving you however we structured in the proposal, so 6 months, 12 months, 12 months, 6 months, which is the typical structure sometimes depending upon when we receive our funding. I have not heard anything about going to the forward funding model, and I'm going to assume that there are certain programs within OSD, like I think the OSD rep program sometimes will forward fund a lot of their efforts. We do not do that in-house, and we don't do it for a number of reasons. One is obligation and disbursement. So we have to be able to track our, how fast we are getting our annual allotment out the door, and also how well you all on the university side are spending it. And if we gave you a bunch of money in FY24, I need to be able to see that you're spending down some portion of that before I release your FY25 allotment. And so that's just us having to be responsible with the taxpayer dollars. And so I don't see us going to the structure of forward funding
Oh,
awards, just because that just hasn't been the nature of things for a while.
okay. Thank you for that answer. The next question is from Paul, and he would like to know, what should you do if the PM does not respond?
If you're contacting a PM at ARO and you've contacted them multiple times and they don't respond, I will make sure that my email address is on these slides. I know every program manager in this building. So just shoot me an email and let me know, hey, I've been trying to reach out to so and so and so. It could be we have a number of folks. We have one program manager who just went out on maternity leave. And so you wouldn't know that she's out for 3 months, but I know that. And so there are a number of reasons why someone just may be unresponsive, and it's not just because they're blowing you off. But if you've been trying to contact someone for a while, please feel free to reach out to me and I can try to make that connection. Not a problem at all.
Wonderful. Okay. The next question is, do you recommend a quad chart at this stage?
No.
All right. Okay. The next question is your early career designation consistent with the NIH definition?
I am not sure what the NIH definition is. For us, it is 5 years from the date of your PhD. So it's our date is consistent with how we the Presidential Early Career Award for Science and Engineers, or PK. So ours is consistent with how the PK's program is run, and PK's program is 5 years from date of your PhD. And I'm
Okay.
not sure if NIH is the same, but that's our timeline.
Okay. So the next question is, how does one apply more specifically to the HBCU-MI proposal or mark eligibility for this award type in addition to the SI and ECP?
So if you're at an HBCU-MI, if it's, I would just say, I would just make sure that that's noted up front. And typically, our process, typically, if you're at HBCU-MI, we have a separate HBCU-MI program office that we work with in terms of how we fund those proposals. So it wouldn't be anything in addition to you other than if it's an HBCU-MI letting us know, and letting us know at the white paper stage that, hey, I'm from an HBCU-MI. Otherwise, if you're invited for a full proposal, our system knows which schools are HBCUs and MIs, and it'll designate it for us. But there's nothing for you to do in terms of telling us, I want the single investigator versus the HBCU, because it really is the same pot of money. It's just how we look at it when we're funding things.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Poree, I believe you touched on this initially a few questions back, but there is another attendee, Holly, who would like to know, given the recent executive orders, what is the likelihood that the HBCU-MI awards will continue?
Oh, I have no, we have been giving no signal that HBCU-MI will go away. That's a federal statute. Um, so I believe that those institutions are pretty protected by law. So I don't see there being any issue with HBC, at least currently, seeing any issues with HBCU-MI.
Okay, thank you again for that answer. Sajid has another question. The comment is, or the question or the statement is, we also showcase products via workshops, could we integrate with workshop grant because we are close to a number of military forts? And within this, he lists Army, Navy Depot, and also Army presence. He wants to know about how they can work those workshop grants to recruit more veterans to go into STEM and disseminate research findings, which could be integrated with the national conference. For example, the American Chemical Society.
Okay, so
I'll
that's
let you
actually
expound on that.
It's an excellent question, and I'm sorry that I did not touch on that when I was talking earlier. So we do we do provide resources for conferences, workshops, etc. It would still go through the same process of reaching out to the program manager, letting them know what's the point of the workshop, what's the point of it, how is it relevant to their portfolios. If you are hosting a one of the symposia, if you are the organizer for a symposia at an ACS meeting, or any of the other major conferences, and you need funding dollars for that. Our BAA, we're able to do that. So that again becomes a conversation between you and the program manager that's most relevant to the topic area. But that is definitely something that we can support. I think we can support anywhere up for a while. It was up to 40,000. I think now it may be down to 25, but that may be a BAA question because I'm just not remembering. But anywhere from as low as a few $1,000s upwards to about, I would say, anywhere from 25 to $40,000 range. And I'd have to consult the BAA to get that top number right. We can do that. But
All
again,
right.
that's another place where you just engage the relevant program manager, but that's definitely a possibility.
Okay. So let's see. Our next question is, could you clarify the difference between ARO-BAA and ARL-BAA topics?
Okay, so I'll pull a disclaimer. We're all ARL. We're one team ARL. Within ARL, that is ARD, which is essentially the in-house research program, and then there's ARO, which is the extramural program. The ARO topics are very. There is no requirement, I guess, for you to work with an Army scientist on those awards. These are areas that the ARO program manager has identified as topic areas that we are interested in supporting extramurally. The intramural programs, these are programs, those topics. The in-house researchers have said, hey, these are areas that we're interested in, and we're looking to partner with folks to work with us on these topics. And so if you're looking more for something that is an Army partnership with you working with an in-house researcher, then I would definitely say look at the ARD. When you're on the Navigate the BAA, definitely click that link to filter by theirs just to see what topics they have out there that they're actively looking for extramural engagement. Extramural engagement on ours don't necessarily don't require that.
Do all reviewers come from the DoD?
So our review process, so all of our proposals are reviewed by both academics and at least one government. So we look for academic researchers who are, again, subject matter experts in areas that are relevant to the topic or the proposal that you have written. But we also want to have a DoD researcher who not only understands science, but also understands Army that can really help us contextualize how this could be relevant in addition to giving their scientific opinion, their assessment of your scientific quality, also tell us how they see this could fit into the overall Army research ecosystem. So all proposals will have at least one Army, and if we don't have an Army person that may have like the best expertise, then we can reach out to someone who's at Navy or AFRL. So there's at a minimum someone for at least one DoD person that gets an eye on our proposals.
Okay, thank you
But the
for that.
others are academics.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So our next question comes from Elizabeth. What is the best way to apply for the early career program, and how early should she start reaching out to a PM? Also, what is the requirement besides being a tenure track assistant professor?
So the only requirement other than being a tenure track assistant professor is being within 5 years of receiving your PhD. I would say the process in terms of engaging with the PM is no different than what I outlined in the talk. I would just say make sure you note to the PM when you're contacting them that, hey, I am a new professor at XYZ University and I'm interested. Let them know that you're interested in the early career award. I would say the only thing to note is that those max at $120,000, whereas there is technically no max on our single investigator. And I've had folks who said, I don't care that I can get more money. I really want the named award. And that really becomes a matter of your personal preference. But if you're really interested in early career, just let the program manager know that that's what you're interested in. Because then we have to have that coded that way in our system.
Okay, thank you for that, Dr. Poree. There's a question from Eben, and he would like to know if an investigator wants to propose something interdisciplinary, should they include all essential experts from other disciplines as well as co-investigators, or is it enough to just outline commitments of mentoring or support from colleagues who may not be named as investigators on a proposal?
Okay, let me make sure I understand. So you want to propose an idea that's interdisciplinary. I guess how you approach this may or may not. So is it just you working on the effort or you and another PI? And how many additional PIs? Because then that also goes into the dollar amount and whether or not it's something that our core program, our single investigator program can support. Dollar wise. If it's just you and one other person, that typically is okay. If you're asking, can you repeat the question? I want to make sure that I'm hearing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the question is, if an investigator wants to propose something interdisciplinary,
Mhm.
should they include all essential experts from other disciplines as co-investigators?
Okay.
And then the second part of that question is, or is it enough to just outline commitments of mentoring and support from colleagues who are not named as investigators on a proposal?
If you list them as co-investigators, then the assumption is that there will be dollars that support those individuals, and
Mhm.
then that needs to be reflected in the budget. If those individuals are just going to be providing you maybe access to their instrumentation, or they're going to just be giving you or serving in advisory capacity to you, they should not be listed as a co-investigator. And that's really, and then you can note that, hey, um, I'm being mentored by Professor X on this, and he will give me access to XYZ. The question that we then becomes if they're not getting dollars is how dependent or how important are they to the success of the work? And so if they're not getting dollars, then you just have to make it clear that the effort stands alone, even if you don't get help from those individuals, but only list them as co-investigators if you are requesting dollars, if those individuals are requesting dollars. If that makes sense.
Okay. Well, Dr. Poree, thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you. I'm glad we had time for good bit of time for questions. I was like, I didn't expect to end so quick. So
Absolutely. And there's still quite a few questions, so you may still be expecting some contacts from
okay.
those who have attended today because there's a very high level of interest in your
Oh, great.
presentation today. Yes, absolutely. So I am going to go on and wrap up the Q&A session for today. But however, for all of the attendees, keep in mind, you'll see the contact information for Dr. Poree and others on your screen. Feel free to take a screenshot or a photo so that you can follow up with any additional questions or discussions after the webinar. Once again, we'd like to extend a very special measure of gratitude to Dr. Dawanne Poree from the Army Research Office for sharing her expertise. And of course, thank you to all of the attendees who have joined us today to learn about crafting proposals that meet Army expectations and that stand out during reviews. This concludes our presentation. We hope that you have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.